to Unfazed Under Fire. I'm David Craig Utz, the Leadership Alchemist, your host and moderator for the show. Now, this show is dedicated to helping executives amplify their leadership impact, gain fresh insights, and build the resilience needed to thrive in today's unpredictable world. We feature two types of guests on this show: thought leaders in leadership development, organizational culture, team dynamics, who share strategies tailored to executive challenges. And like today, we're joined by seasoned executives who have embraced leadership development, recognizing that people and culture are keys to unlocking their true potential and that of their organizations. Now, at its core, this show is about pioneering breakthroughs in leadership and culture, creating environments that bring out the best in others, and inspiring excellence in service to the greater good and one's vision. Authentic leadership is the driving force behind all of this. When leaders connect deeply to their purpose and authentically engage the human spirit, what once seemed impossible becomes just not achievable, but inevitable. We believe that effective leadership starts from within. True impact flows from self-mastery, which is what gives leaders the clarity and confidence to guide others. In these disruptive times, self-mastery isn't just a benefit. It's a bedrock of success. When executives harness their inner resourcefulness and lead from the inside out, they unlock the full potential of collaboration, the most powerful unifying force that any organization can wield. Now, today, as I mentioned, we're bringing onto the show a highly seasoned executive, technology leader Neil Morris. Welcome, Neil. Thanks for taking the time to join us on the show today.
Thank you for having me, David. Happy to be here.
Great. Now, before we jump into our conversation, I want to share a little bit of your background because it's pretty spectacular. Neil is the head of technology for Redaptive, an energy as a service provider that funds and installs energy saving and energy generating equipment. He's a highly experienced executive with strong background in enterprise architecture and leadership. He's led transformations in organizations like Maxar Technologies, Ball Aerospace, and ADT, overseeing the modernization of IT infrastructure and driving business alignment through strategic architecture initiatives. Now, summing all that up, Neil is an innovative leader and change agent focusing on driving large-scale digital transformation, cloud migrations, and the adoption of agile methodologies. And he has an impact because he is highly respected for building and motivating high-performing teams, known for their ability to deliver optimal results, innovative answers, and cost-effective solutions. Now, when not leading technology advancements, he and his wife, Carissa, share a highly fulfilling life with their 4 daughters in Firestone, Colorado, and own Ohana Martial Arts Academy there, which we're going to talk a little bit about. But it's great to have you again, Neil. Appreciate you being on the show. And I just like to start off by, as I do with all my guests, because we're human beings first, and we've come into this world, this sphere that we live on. We were dropped in, and we have this life experience that leads us through all these experiences. And we're going to get into some of the nitty gritty of those experiences, but I'd like you to just talk about your life journey a little bit. Maybe a couple of the twists and turns you made that maybe have led you, kind of bring us up to speed. You can start anywhere you'd like, but we want you to bring us up to current day so we can go from there.
Yeah, no, thanks again for having me on.
You're welcome.
I've shared my story with a handful of people, and they seem to think it's a lot more interesting than I do. But born and raised in Fresno, California, you had nothing overly spectacular about that. But one of the things that really set my trajectory fairly early on was I became a father at a very young age. My wife and I been together for a little over 30 years, married for 26, and we met our freshman year in high school, and ended up pregnant and having my oldest when I was 16. Right, so that really set my trajectory right off of an early age. You had to grow up quick, had to get a job, had to learn how to get things done, and you had very supportive family that kind of helped out through that process, but was very much a life-changing kind of circumstance that not a lot of people end up going through, and it really set kind of my drive and my desire, and really some of the course. Fast forward through the number of years, some job changes, learning how to be you had a technologist, and you had a father, and you had a martial artist, and all these kind of experiences. My wife and I ended up with 4 daughters, and our
Mm.
youngest ended up severely autistic and nonverbal, something that
Wow.
we figured out when she was about 3. She is now 19, right? And things are going very well for her. But learning how to manage and interact with people, because especially with an autistic daughter, right? You learn that it does take a village, right? And it
Yeah.
takes support. And how do you get the right people around you? And how do you take the situations that are put in front of you and really find the good in them, what you can learn from them, how you drive, and how you can support yourself, but also everyone around you to achieve those goals. So really ended up providing a mindset just from being an early father, special needs daughter, martial arts, moving from California to Colorado when we were pregnant with our 4th. Um, you really learn how to adapt to situations that are put in front of you and kind of accept everything as a learning opportunity. And that's
Mm.
really kind of what's led me to where I am today.
Yeah, and it's a really beautiful sharing. And yeah, it is interesting. A lot of times our story is more interesting to others than ourselves. I would feel the same way sometimes. So I can appreciate that. But it's like the one thing, a couple of things you just said is, today more than any other time, and it seems to be increasingly so, resilience and taking it one moment at a time is becoming more the mode of living. But when you have kind of those challenges of early fatherhood and then a special needs daughter and all the things that came in between with the other two that you had, right? And
Yeah.
then martial arts, throw that in there. It's really that general adaptation and flexibility and resilience that you gain from all that certainly applies to the business landscape, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Right. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, life is nothing but a series of situations that you find yourself in, right? And you have to you, know, you know, take kind of those core foundational principles, right, of just being resilient, right? My granddaughter, her name's Serenity, and I think of like that Serenity prayer, right? Hey, give me
Yeah.
the ability to change those things I
Take other
can't,
things I
to
can.
accept the things that I can't,
Can't. Right.
and uh, that's really a very strong life mantra, core principle, because you can learn something through any circumstance, right? And
Yeah.
how do you apply those, whether you're yet in the middle of kind of martial arts, business, life, right? Yet be grateful for everything that is put in front of you because everything has a lesson. Some of those are good,
Difficult, challenging. Yeah.
yeah, difficult and less fun to learn than others. But people are the totality of their life experiences, and that's what
Yeah.
they bring to the table. And if you're willing to be yet authentic in yourself and accept those as learning opportunities, right, and see how you interact with other people, right, and how you can get things done, you can really kind of progress and move that needle in you know, across all aspects of life and business.
Yeah, I have a friend who's a songwriter, Bob Same. He's has a song, "Life isn't happening to you; it's happening for you." And it's kind of like what you're saying is inherent in what you're saying is that and I think that we have a world where I'm not saying that people don't have challenging circumstances they have to overcome much bigger than I do. Um, I'm going to be having a guest on the show, Jessica Vox, who was born without arms and now she's a pilot. So I mean, it's phenomenal things that we can do because what I call the human spirit, and this points to something you've done, which is you own Ohana Martial Arts Academy. You talked about obviously martial arts has been part of your life for a long period of time. What led you to go into martial arts and to start could be so fervent and a believer in it that you started your own academy. Uh,
Yeah, so the starting story is probably less interesting than the ending.
yeah,
I was
usually
a
is.
young boy, and my parents put me in martial arts. Yeah,
uh,
yeah. Whether you talk to them, whether getting me out of the house or giving me something to do with my
this will be good
energy,
for him. This will be good for him.
yeah, will be good for them. That was kind of how it started. And once you get in there, um, you learn that you know, it's just about that stick-to-itiveness, right?
Yeah,
Some of the best martial artists I know didn't start and aren't the best athletes. They're not the star there, right? There's certainly those martial athletes that we've referred to them as that just have
sure.
those
Sure.
phenomenal like martial skill. Uh, but it's the difference between fighting and martial arts, right? There's a lot of really good fighters, but to be a martial artist is a level of discipline and practice and continuous improvement and self-betterment, right? And just, there's a whole lifestyle and mindset to it that just is like things are going to be hard, right? Not everything's going to come easy. But yet, if you stick to it, if you practice, if you learn, if you continuously improve, you can become more proficient. And that was a very profound kind of thing that I learned early, kind of in my martial arts journey, that then applied to business and all sorts of different aspects of my life. And one of those that I want to do in part to my children. And my wife got into martial arts, and my children all got into martial arts. And we just really kind of gravitated into it as a lifestyle. So much so that we opened up the martial arts academy. My wife is now the primary instructor, right? And we get great satisfaction out of seeing all of our students come in. Some are great athletes, some are not, some are uncoordinated, but just watching everyone improve, just that kind of 1% a day, 1% a week, just gradual over time. And we have students that have been with us for 3, 4, 5 years since we opened the school in 2018, and seeing them come from children to adults, or adults looking at situations differently, and just being more flexible, gives me great satisfaction.
Yeah, there's so much you said there, like the idea of why do you show up at the dojo every day or the academy to do your work? What's your focus? Why show up? So there has to be a reason for it. Well, in your case, it was your parents initially, but over
Yeah,
time, maybe you gravitated to something more important to that, and the continued development of mastery might have been one of those things, right? And then the
absolutely.
idea, right? And then the idea that you know. I had an athlete on the show that's going to be on soon, Gray Baldwin, who's was a professional basketball player, and he said that confidence doesn't come from motivation. I mean, that's an aspect of confidence. He says, but what happens is if you do something in a disciplined way over time, you just naturally become more confident. I'm wondering, you probably see that in your students at the academy, or in direct reports, or in yourself as you do something for a while, and it's not like an arrogance. It's like something settles in. Is that fair?
I think it is, right? And I think I think everyone kind of experiences that maybe at a micro level, right? I think it's a very common experience for people to learn how to drive, right? And
Yeah,
the 16-year-old behind the wheel, or 18, depending on your state, right? It's a very conscious thing. As adults that have been doing it for 20, 30 years, sometimes we're not even as conscious doing it as maybe
yeah.
we should
How did I
be,
get home?
right? Yeah, how did I get home? I just, put the car on autopilot, right? Because it becomes natural, right? Just because it
Yeah,
gets practiced so often, which
yeah,
is the wonderful thing about martial arts, because it's not about fighting, right? It's about improvement, lifestyle, fitness, and just by going through kind of that process, you can show up more confidently just as a person, right, in a lot of different situations, and that confidence just comes with practicing, right?
yeah,
It's we teach children how to introduce themselves to adults and how to shake hands, right? And when you see one of your students walk up to an adult outside of the dojo and say, "Yeah, David, nice to meet you. My name is little Johnny," right? And confidence coming from an 8-year-old, it's uncommon today. And
yeah.
it's just one of those things that people get better as they practice. And we give people the opportunity to practice those things.
Well, thank you for doing that. I think that's the kind of thing we should be teaching in schools, right? More. Maybe we've lost touch with some basic educational things we could be doing. But that's another story for another day. Now,
Yeah.
throughout your career, obviously martial arts was an influence on you and influence and colored your leadership, and we'll probably touch on that more as we go forward. But what have there been what have been some other influences on shaping your approach to leading and building teams? If you would share that, if you have kind of where other things might have come into play.
Yeah, so I think of kind of leading teams, right? And I've been fortunate to lead teams for a very long time. Uh, when I started as a technologist, right, and started the kind of help desk and you had systems administration, right, in the
Yeah, I
late
saw
kind of
that.
.com areas, um, I realized I'm not that good of a technologist, right? There's a lot of people that have a lot more skill in the execution of deploying technology than I did. But I have an ability to understand like what the business is trying to achieve through technology, right? So that really led me into architecture, right, and finding those crossroads and giving purpose to technology, right? Because a lot of technologists and some of the people that I know are just best in the world at doing technology, whether that's being networking, cloud services, right? Giving them the ability to understand what the business is trying to do and how to achieve those outcomes was really where I found my passion from a technology perspective. So I became a leader very early on, right? And helping technology organizations through architecture, even before I knew that was the terminology for it,
Right.
marry that technology to business outcomes. And I've spent a number of years, 2 decades plus at this point, kind of refining, how do we think about business? How do we talk about business? And how do we bring technology to those problems to help them accelerate their organizations, right? And it's not necessarily about ROI. I actually hate efficiencies, right, as a metric of success. But how do you improve revenue per employee, right? How do we get everyone
Yeah.
to be more efficient at helping the business sell, deliver, right, and show value? Um,
Yeah. Well, and this is kind of where we need to go to the next step, like in enterprise architecture. And as I see it, I mean, I talk to other people involved in this area, and it's still fairly, even in some big organizations, fairly not misunderstood, not fully understood, or appreciated. I don't know if that's fair, or if I have a limited slice that I've seen, and maybe it's much bigger. It is a bigger thing. It's named enterprise architecture now, at least. But if you could talk a little bit about you described it as being a master blueprint for aligning organization and business goals. Could you explain a little bit more the role? And you started already doing that, but expand that a little bit. How it reduces complexity and fosters better decision making across the organization and helps organize the actual IT that you already have or technology that you're selling more effectively.
Yeah, I think from an enterprise architecture, like from the practice of enterprise architecture, you hear DODAF and you hear TOGAF and you hear ZACMIT and you hear all these different frameworks and everything. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with those, right? But they do kind of make it difficult for the individual kind of business executive to understand because they're trying to run the business, right? They're not architects. And the technologist, they just want to deploy technology. They're not architects. So that architecture really fits in the middle, right? And I think as a practice of enterprise architecture, we can get spun around the axle on these frameworks, right? Enterprise architecture is really about you know, listening to the business, understanding their vision of where they want the business to go, and then providing a GPS, right, of how do we get there, right? It doesn't have to be exact, right? It doesn't have to be completely documented ahead of time, right? You can do this in a very agile kind of way, not trying to cross the streams with agile software development or anything, but we can be flexible, right, and adapt to changing business climates and really looking at things in a simplistic way to say, You got, everybody sells, right? How do we enable those sellers, right? We got to run a good operation. We got to deliver, right? We got to continuously develop our people because technology is changing, and we got to keep in line with that strategy. And just how do you do those really basic things really well with high quality in terms that the business understands, but then turn around and also put it in terms that the technologists understand, so we can really meet those two organizations in the middle and get them all rowing in the same direction, pulling the same rope at the same time, which is really where enterprise architecture, I think, often misses the mark because we get overly complex in our frameworks and how we do the process and not focus on the results.
Yeah. Well, to me, what you're doing is, if I may, again, I might be messing this up, but it feels like you're bringing a leadership mindset to the connection between the business and technology. That leaders kind of are creators. They have vision. That vision is their primary creative modality. So whether it's how are we going to leverage talent, how are we going to improve sales, how are we going to, be more efficient in our processes, whatever it is, there's an end game that you have to get from the business executive. Then you have to somehow translate that to the technologist to do that. And the architecture is the thing that holds it all together. Is that fair? Is that a fair description, would you say?
I think that is a fair description of it, right? It's listening to the business, listening to the story they're trying to tell, right? And then reframe that story in a way that technologists understand how they can support, right, the organization delivering on that mission, right? So I absolutely think that's fair.
Yeah. Now you have a kind of way that you hold this together in a 5-pillar model. Is that right? If that's something that you could describe to us, like if you're going to do enterprise architecture, this is the way I do it. And maybe that's the wrong model, but how do you hold it all together? So when you're looking through that lens, probably automatically, but you're also helping other people look through that lens so they can make sense of it.
Yeah, so said over the last couple decades, I've kind of looked at enterprise architecture a number of different ways and how to manage those things. And I ended up calling it GODS, GODDS, right? Because it's easy for me to remember, right? And I think of that as growth, operations, delivery, development, and strategy, right? So and it's pretty simplistic, right? When I think growth, I think everyone sells, right? You have salespeople, that's an easy concept to understand. From a technologist perspective in a business, right, it's identify who your internal customers are, right? And to sell, whether you're selling to an external person or an internal customer, right, that's about relationship, understanding their needs, right? Understanding where they're going to get value, and then aligning what you're selling, right, your technology solutions, to what they need and how you're going to produce value, right? So that's what I call growth, right? Operations is every IT organization and any organization of any size has a budget, right? We have things we have to do, and we have to manage our IT organization like a business, right? Or else you're not going to be permitted to kind of continue to do those things, right? So we got to make sure that we're taking care of the T's and C's and running a good business, right? Delivery, right? Once you've identified the business needs, right, and you go buy something from an external party, right, you expect to get value from it. You got to deliver, you got to track it, right? The same it holds true if it's an internal organization, right? We understand where the business is going, we're aligned with the value, we got to deliver on our promises. From a development perspective, technology changes incredibly quick, especially over the last couple of years when you see AI and LLMs and machine learning, right? We can talk about the academics and the roots of artificial intelligence going back to the 50s, but it's really been the last couple of years where the computing power has really got into a point where you see it really take off. So the pace of change is quick, and you got to stay on top of those. So you got to continuously work on developing your people, developing yourself, and then all of it has to be aligned with some strategy, right? Strategy is kind of that marriage of where we need to go and how we need to get there, right? You hear the business, but you can't be everything to everybody, right? So in strategy, a lot of times it's how do we focus down on what's the most important? How do we say this is where we want to be in 5 years and start making progress that way, while still giving yourself the ability to be flexible? And when I kind of break it down for myself, which is kind of where it started, just in that 5 kind of pillar model of growth, operations, delivery, development, and strategy, it provides a nice, easy framework without getting overly complicated and
Well,
pulling out the TOGAF certification, which becomes overly complex for a lot of organizations unless they're at a critical scale where it makes sense.
it's kind of like walking into the dojo as a first timer, watching a 6-degree black belt working on the mat, and completely being, wow, how do they do that? Right? You got to break that
Well,
down to simpler steps, right? So
yeah, break it down to simpler steps and realize they've been
it's going
doing
to
it
take
for
a long
30
time,
years.
a long
Yeah,
time.
so it's like thousands of hours on the mat. So how do you just start
Repetition.
that journey?
Yeah,
Yes.
repetitions. And what do you see as some of the common mistakes or challenges organizations run into when they may become frustrated about enterprise architecture or feel like it's not working for them, or they go down some alleys they should go? What are some of the bigger challenges you see organizations facing in applying this that might dissuade them or slow them down?
I mean, it's not finding that balance and building that bridge, right? So at the end of the day, you business and technology is about people, right? We do what we do, whether it's building cars, working on energy, in sustainability, building satellites, right? Working at ADT security and protecting people's homes, right? By itself, there's not an intrinsic value in a piece of technology, right? It's what it enables your customers to do, right? It's what it enables your employees to do. So keeping very human-centric and human first, right, is key, right? And what you see a lot of times is you start talking to the business. What do you need? Where are you going? What's the strategy? Okay, how do we make this technology work? And everyone gets really heads down, and they start to put together this architecture, right, that gets further and further and further away from the business because it gets pulled more towards the technology. And then you start hearing architecture being talked about, the ivory tower, right? They're going and building these, fanciful designs of how systems should be together and building these, elegant
Yeah,
mousetraps, right, that never seem to work at the end of the day, right? And it's that ivory tower syndrome, which really comes from not putting the humans and who you're working with, who those customers are, internal or external, right, in the middle of every decision, and really, partnering with the business to make sure you keep going back to those customers and making sure that
yeah,
their needs are being met first and foremost. Because if not, then architecture is a bunch of pretty pictures, maybe some fun technology, right? But it's not actually advancing the business or advancing mankind potentially,
yeah.
depending on the technology spheres that you're working in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're in that, inherent in that is, how are we developing a relationship with each other, building trust, building mutual understanding, not going off the reservation and getting totally enamored. And that happens with tech. I mean, I work with a lot of technology executives, that just fall in love with whatever. And that's very easy to do because it's exciting. But then you lose touch when you try to go back and explain why you're so excited to the head of sales or the head of finance, and they're going, what, because of that. So but it really, if you understand and you're intimately connected to the business and understand their concerns as a driving force for what you're doing, that fusion that break doesn't happen.
I agree, because there's a lot of people out there that tell a very compelling story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy the recent publications and articles and everything I've read about the power of storytelling, right? And
Mm-hmm.
how to tell a story as a technologist to the business, right? But understanding the business. But yet a lot of executives, technologists go to a conference, hear a very compelling story on how Kubernetes or AI or this shiny object's going to solve all of their problems, right? And I think the part that gets missed is that's their story, right? And
Yeah.
it's a compelling story, but it's not necessarily our story as a business, right?
Yeah.
So understanding, can that or should that be a part of our story and how we deliver value to our customers, and continuously going back to those relationships, right? It is critically important, but it starts with being close to the business, building those relationships, building those bridges, and understanding what your story is as an organization and how you deliver value for your internal customers, and then through that, the external customers of the business.
Well, it's what you're saying, basically saying is technologists have to be better at critically thinking because they're going into these conferences. Those stories have been crafted to tap into your psychology and get you excited. They know exactly what they're doing when they're crafting those stories. As we all know, the narrative can be king. But if you don't ground that in, how is this helping my business? Okay, let me ask some questions around that. That sounds awfully good, but and it's you have to become a critical thinker and also remember who you're working for and who you're trying to support in the end, right? So
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's it. I'm amazed, and I find myself, caught up with the excitement of a good story,
of
right? But
course, I do
taking
too.
that
I
and
mean,
grounding it back,
I've gotten
it's like,
sucked in many times. It's just being human, because
uh-huh,
we get moved. We get moved by something, and when we're emotionally moved, and then we form a belief without checking out what we believe. That happens all the time. We can see that happen in the political spectrum, right? It's like it happens all the
absolutely.
time. Like, okay, what's really happening? Let me look with my eyes at what's happening and relate to that. So anyway, that's very funny. So and I don't know if this is what you're touching on, but you're a real advocate for leveraging EA with digital transformation or enterprise architecture, digital information. What's the role of the modern enterprise architecture frameworks play in enabling organizations to stay agile and competitive in a rapidly evolving environment? You might have touched on that a little bit, but if you could extrapolate on that a little bit, how does it help with those things?
Yeah, I said to you, I think of enterprise architecture as kind of like organizational GPS. How do you get from where you are to where you want to go, right? Understanding that story, right? And I kind of touched on, a lot of the larger frameworks, the trap that we can get on is we draw out, that path, right? And we start down that road, but we realize there's a detour, right? Some new technology comes in, some new disruptor comes in, something that comes at us that maybe we were or were not expecting, that radically changes the path we need to take, right? And um, enterprise architecture, if we're engaged with the business, flexible, understand the enterprise frameworks and those reference architectures, and we abstract where we're going from the tools that we're using. Just we need to get from here to there. Maybe we take, I'm in Denver, I-25 straight north, right? But maybe I need to hop over to 85,
Right,
right? And
right.
allowing those frameworks to allow you to be flexible and nimble to adjust to those changing realities of the business landscape, of the technical landscape, of the disruptors, to take advantage of those opportunities to find a faster route or work around some of those detours is a critical piece to that enterprise architecture. And having those really strong reference architectures that say, there's some fundamental stuff that we just need to make sure we get right, right? We can't bring in a piece of technology, right, that doesn't fit with our cybersecurity requirements and posture, right? Because that would put the business at risk.
Yes.
We can't do these kind of things, or these are the things that we should bias towards heavily because they're right for our business, right? And putting those things in that context, but it gives you a framework of getting where you're going without being so rigid that you have to you drive around all the obstacles and you through all the potholes, right? And being able to adapt to the changing reality of the business climate, which is also one of the areas I think enterprise architecture falls short, because no one really likes change, including architects that's jobs is to drive change,
Right.
right? But being able to be flexible is key to that, and making sure you build those bridges and understand the business, right? And yeah, allow for those deviations to happen when the reality changes, which seems to be a daily challenge
Well,
in
and
today's modern
I
world.
look at, yeah, and I'm looking at AI as an example. Uh, just an example, and I may be oversimplifying this, but if I process something through AI, which saves me a lot of time, how can I trust what I've done, or what the output is, because it's smarter than I am in some degree, but it also may have a bias built into it, right? I mean, that's an example. I mean, that's at a simple level. But how do, how would you answer that question? How do we make sure that this is like, is it possible we could be taken down the wrong path by deploying it, or how do we avoid that?
I think you could absolutely be taken down the wrong path, right? And when I think AI, one of the recent talk tracks that I've been sharing with a lot of people is we refer to it as artificial intelligence. In today's world, that gets caught up with large language models and generative AI in a lot of different contexts, right? And talking about like, hey, can it lead me down the wrong path? Right? How do I validate hallucinations, bias, all these kind of things? And it makes people's jobs in a lot of ways harder, right? It makes them faster, right? But and we have to train people how to work with these AI tools, which I tend to refer to as augmented intelligence instead of artificial intelligence, because I think they can really augment my capability to
Yeah,
deliver
make me
value faster.
grow my IQ for sure, right?
Yeah, but you have to put that human reasoning behind it,
Yes.
and people really have to get good at that critical thinking, right? It's I can't just put in a question, right, and accept the answer. I have to
Okay.
question the data set. I got to question the validity. I got to test it, right? So it can accelerate in a lot of ways our ability to get value and think about things in different ways. But you got to get really good at building those models, building those prompts, right? Anyone that's just using AI and asking a basic question, what is the answer to life?
Yeah.
Right? And taking what the AI provides, right, without really interrogating it and understanding that and looking against different data sources and putting their human reasoning and their expertise on top of it is missing where the real value is, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah, that's what I feel like. It's and again, I'm like, you know, baby steps from where you're at with understanding all this. But if I understand the vision for why I'm using it, it goes back to where am I trying to take myself through and engaging AI, and what instructions do I need to give it that are my assumptions that it needs to know, so it takes me closer to what I'm trying to create. If I don't do that, you're right, it goes in a million different places, and that's a simplistic way of looking at it maybe, but that's kind of what I've discovered. You have to, just like any relationship, you have to ask questions. And
Oh,
then you got to set
it,
context, and you set the direction, so yeah.
and it's amazing how much intelligence it can provide, right? But in a lot of ways, it's a very unintelligent interface, right? You have to get very specific, on those personas, tones, style, information, validation, right? So even people that I've found to be very good at soliciting good responses out of different large language models, it takes a lot of time, right, to think about how I'm going to interact with this intelligent coworker, co-pilot. There's a lot of different terms for it, to make sure I get the best answers. And even then, I got to interrogate those responses a few different ways to really maximize the value. But if you go through that exercise, the value you can get out of it is tremendous.
Well, and I look at us as, I have worked with some very highly intelligent individuals that had no capacity for leadership or even consciousness or awareness around relationship and needs of other people. We have, like they say, we have three brains, the one between our ears, the heart, and the gut. And you might relate to that in martial arts as well. And I don't think AI is processing the wisdom of the heart or the wisdom of the gut a lot of times. So we've got to take that into effect and understand that intelligence cut off from those other two things can be dangerous, right? We all know that.
It
So
it it, it absolutely can be. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Well, and let's step into kind of your leadership philosophy and your team building philosophy a little bit, because I think one of the reasons why I have guests like you on the show is because you've gotten it, what the importance of developing your own leadership, and certainly that came from developing mastery in martial arts and other in your experience as an executive. You found that invaluable, but also in the building a team. So, what is your philosophy on building and nurturing high performing teams that can navigate all these challenges we're facing and embrace change and really produce value?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to putting the human in the center, right? Early on in my technical career, I made some, looking back at it, pretty fundamental mistakes, right? And mistakes teach you just as much as successes, probably
Absolutely, probably more.
10 times, right? And with experience comes a lot of
Yeah,
failure. With a lot of failure comes experience and learning. And when I started, I was very much that technologist deploying technology for technology, right? And had some very, you know, I'll call them spectacular. I don't think they were necessarily all that spectacular failures, but programs that failed to produce the results that were anticipated, right? And as I sat back and we went through and we were talking through these, and I've been fortunate to have a number of great mentors and leaders, also some not so great ones in my past
but
that I was
also can
able to
teach you
learn
a lot
from,
about leadership too,
which
right?
also teach you a lot about leadership. Was like you know getting back to that, technology does not have any intrinsic value, right? I'm sitting in front of my laptop here, and it's a very sophisticated piece of electronics that without a human using it or soliciting the value out of it, right, it has no intrinsic value in and of itself. So kind of going back and saying, okay, what is the end result? What am I trying to do with this technology? And then really working with teams, then getting into kind of leadership. How do you impart, coach, mentor, right? Understand your team, where they are, right, in their journey, right, as individuals. What inspires them? What gets them moving? How can I put them in a place where they can be most successful to deliver
Right,
technology and solutions for customers, right? And saying that there's two sides, three sides, 10 sides to this human equation, right? And technology is just a part of it, right? And probably the least important part of it, versus understanding your people, their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, where they want to go in their career. How can you give them those opportunities to succeed and fail, right, in safe places, in safe methods that allow us to rapidly advance where they are, and they're getting fulfillment, and we're delivering real value for the business and helping the business tell its story to the street, to their end customers, which are also humans on the other
mhm,
end of that continuum. So it's very much leading from the heart, right? Yet as much as leading from the head, and understanding and valuing people for where they are, what they bring to the table, and realizing not everyone's in the same place, right? And I can't treat employees like equipment. I've made that mistake in the past, and like, hey,
mhm,
everyone needs to get on this train. It's like there's
right.
certain people that don't want to get on that train, and we need people that are in other parts of their journey, right, to fill up the roster. Um,
Right.
so it's human-centric leadership is definitely key to where I am and where I bring my value. Because like I said, I'm not necessarily the best technologist, and less
Right.
so the more I spend time in leadership.
Well, again, and the higher you go in an organization, the less you do of what you were an expert in, right? That what you're really and I say this all the time, and I said this on the podcast a number of times, you're basically paid to facilitate conversations and facilitate teams to be operating at the highest functioning level they can to produce transformational outcomes that matter, right? And you're facilitating that. So if you could like you now, let's imagine you're getting a new project. It's a digital transformation process, or it's a whatever it is. It's related to building out the architecture more, whatever it is. You got these 6 to 8 people on the team. Walk me through how you approach a project like that to make sure it gets the result and then it applies those human-centric principles, like step by step. If you could, obviously don't drill down to a whole lot of detail, but if you would, let's say, here's the steps to do it. If I'm dealing with that situation, this is what I would do first, second, third, kind of thing.
Yeah. So first thing that I think of is, the project is created, right, for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my first step is to work with those sponsors, right?
Yes.
Understand what they're driving to. Like,
mm-hmm.
if this project is, as successful as it can be, right? What does that look like at the end, right? How does your day change? How does our, sales change? How does the value we deliver to our customers change? What is that story, right, that they would like to hear or be able to share when it's done, right? Because that provides an incredibly powerful context to the why, right? You can then take that to the team, right? And if you go to the team and say, we're going to go, build widget XYZ, right? It's completely uninspiring, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to go build ABC, right? But in a knowledge economy with technical people that are creative, right, and looking to solve problems, it's not all that inspiring. But if you can take that story and say, we are going to unlock this value to the business, right? We are going to help the business grow 10x by delivering these capabilities, right? What do you think, right? And getting everyone on board, right, behind the project, understanding the why, understanding the value, it really builds a core for success because everyone's bought into the mission of that individual project, right? It builds the sense of urgency. Like, oh, yes, if we could unlock that value, we can 10x our business. That's exciting, right? And once the people are there, then it's, okay, what are we missing, right, to get this done, right? Do we have the skills? Do we have the capabilities? Do we have the budget? Where are those obstacles, and how do we line those up and really prioritize that work to get everyone catalyzed around delivering the value, right? And then getting them in front of those customers and that back and forth dialogue. And then they always come up with better technology solutions than I would ever come up with, right? And come up with very creative ideas. But it's really about getting the buy-in, getting that story right, getting people excited to be part of something that allows them to do something that's larger than themselves, right? And that team dynamic is really, really key to success, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's what I hear you saying, and it's pretty much what you said. Is first of all, you have to understand what you are enrolling the team in by going out to the stakeholders, the sponsors, and understanding what their vision, what measurable impact, what has to happen for that vision to be unfolded in a way that would measurably impact the business in the way they want it. Get really clear on that. Then you go back and you're kind of then enrolling the team in that vision and saying, here's what the opportunity here is for everybody on this team. And everybody, you have a part to play in this. That's why I've put you on this team, because you're the right people for the job. And it's kind of getting them in the same boat together, fundamentally, as a metaphor. And then
Absolutely.
then you start working on how do we keep rowing like a crew team? How do we keep rowing the same direction, the same right, picking up the oars at the right time and putting them in the water, and along the way we'll probably have some challenges with bumping heads and conflict. That's part of the deal. And how are we going to deal with that when that happens? Do you think about those things ahead of time? Like, if we start having challenges on this team, this is how we're going to resolve the issues amongst us. Is that something you talk about? And if so, how do you deal with that one?
Yeah, so it's an area where I don't probably spend as much time as I should, at least initially. My initial thought is always, how do I build excitement, understand where we're
Yeah.
going, get
That makes
everyone in
complete
the boat,
sense. Absolutely.
right? Once
That
you have
solves a lot
everyone
of
in
problems.
the boat,
Yeah, that solves a lot of problems right there. No doubt.
once everyone's in the boat, right, and you start to see those disruptions, uh, you had, you had, I get the team together, right, and really like, hey, let's have those open, honest, transparent conversations, right? We're never going to get there, right? And if you look at the oar behind you and say your side of the boat is sinking, right? That's never a good situation, right? It's the boat is sinking, right? So it's how do we do this together, right? And part of that, and I think this is something that I spend some time doing ahead of time, is for people to get bought on, for people to be part of a team, for people to have those honest, dialogues. David, this is not working for us. We need to work through this. That requires a safe place to operate, right? If you have a lot of politics and backstabbing and those kind of challenges where people don't feel safe to be creative, share ideas, and challenge each other, um, that's really where those problems become problematic. So I do spend some time making sure that we're developing cultures, right? Even before we get programs and projects brought in, where people can say, I don't think that's the right answer, right? And
Right.
here's why, right? And have a very open and transparent dialogue where those
Right.
challenges could be and where those options are. Uh, but the flip side of that is also understanding at some point we have to make a decision. So let's all share our ideas. Let's challenge those. Let's agree with whose decision it is to make. Once those decisions are made, okay,
We're all
let's
moving in
all
that
row and
direction.
get behind the plan. Um,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, you just actually did answer because you're before you're putting these teams together for particular projects, you've built an organization that has a culture. And that culture has a certain way. Here's how we do things around. Here's what behaviors that are acceptable or that actually add value to moving things forward. And these are unacceptable behaviors that we don't put up with. You know, we created an environment that promotes high performing and the best, bringing our best selves to work every day. We have certain ways of operating with each other through respect and how we build trust, and that's built in a certain way already before you step into a project. That's what I hear you saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I don't think of it as part of the project onboarding. It actually
Right.
comes probably even before that.
Right. So, given those out there that are striving to rise in their careers, maybe they're aspiring to be, maybe they're at the director level or they're just approaching VP level, whatever. What do you offer aspiring executives looking to make a significant impact through technology and leadership as like your go-to advice for here's what I would do? I know it's a pretty general question, and you probably are looking specifically if I was approaching you as one of those executives. But in general, what do you say? Here's what I would keep an eye on, so that you can maybe save some time from what I did or didn't do, or embrace those opportunities that feel challenging, that might feel like a kick in the gut, and take advantage of them.
Yeah. So when I'm talking to I'll say younger leaders, people earlier in their careers. I was recently talking to a handful of folks at the Young Professionals Board of the Colorado Technology Association, and what I tell them is, you really got to decide, where you are and where your value is, right? So even before I want to be a director, a VP, right? Is what what energizes you like as a person,
Yeah.
right? Where do you want to be, right? Because I found myself in a handful of roles where it's just like, this isn't the right fit, right? And some experimentation in that is healthy. But if you define what your value is and where you're going to get the most personal satisfaction out of it, and that aligns to being a VP, a director, right, a CIO, then that's great. But you really got to start with kind of looking in the mirror and being very conscious about your value and what you want to do, right? Because if your values, what you want to do, right, what energizes you, what makes you go home in the evening and you just want to share with your wife, significant other, hey, guess what I did today? This was the most exciting thing that could have happened, right? That's how people want to go home most days, right? What is that energizes you? And then how do you find opportunities to kind of do that, right? If you're going into leadership, right, and you get really excited about the latest release of Kubernetes or this tech, right? Really questions like, hey, is management where I should be, or should I go down a technical leadership route, right? Because if you get that right and your values and your motivations aren't aligned with what energizes you, you can get into those positions and it's not actually where you want to be, right? And that's a hard spot to be. So I kind of even take it back from there. And then if people decide they do want to go into those director VP roles, it's like really study human behavior, organizational behavior, right? Because it's a people business, right? You are stepping out of a technical role
Yep.
into a role where you are delivering value through others. If that energizes you, that's fantastic. You're on a good path. But take time and study people. Like what makes them tick. Learn who's working for you. Get to know them at a personal level and really figure out how you can be supportive to them. Because if you can get all of your people like lifted up and delivering at a higher value, right? That's really where success as a leader comes in and builds other opportunities in those organizations to build progressively larger, more complex teams, manage things differently. But you got to find out what type of leader you want to be, right? And really align with your values.
Yeah, I mean, I find a lot of times when people are so focused on the latter, they miss a lot of what you said. If they're focusing on taking the next step up, as somehow that's going to make them, and we all know that most people that take the step up to the next ladder, oh, it's not what I thought it was. I don't know, sure, this is not as fulfilling as I thought it was, or is not exactly what I expected. And I didn't do some of the things that you suggested they do. But if you get connected to what you're passionate about and you follow your nose and you get really more and more masterful at that, your career takes care of itself. If you're doing a good job of connecting to other people, serving other people, etc. And the other side of it, I like, it is really understanding human psychology, the way human beings operate. That starts with what you did, which I think is probably more transparent to you than most people because you're a martial artist. But really, self mastery is where it all starts. I understand how people tick first by getting to know how I tick. Now, not everybody's the same as me, but there are certain things that I notice, like I get reactive. When I get reactive, I'm not my best self. When I'm non-reactive, when I'm in the moment, when I'm attending to listening, I do a better job. Now, those are general things that you learn from, and then you can help other people find those things as well, right? So, yeah.
And I think a key to a lot of that is, regardless of your position, your title, where you are in your career, we don't often take enough time, right, in silence and self-reflection to understand that about
Oh, praise the
ourselves,
Lord. Thank you for saying that.
right?
That's so
So,
important.
yeah, take those few minutes. I know people that journal, right? If that works for you, journal, right? Meditation, if that works for
Take a
you, do
walk in
it. But find
nature or
something
whatever.
that works.
Yeah.
Find what works for you and take time every day to just think about, how did I show up? How can I show up better? How am I motivated? Where do I find my value in this world, right? And if you can understand yourself better, you can show up better for others.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Well, as we wrap up today, last question is: as you look ahead, what emerging trends, technologies, issues do you see having the most significant impact on the role of a CIO or enterprise architects that you think have to be attended to that you may not have shared today or you want to reemphasize that are important for your profession and leaders in your profession to be keeping their eye on?
Yeah, so when I'm thinking like macro level, like years down the road at the role of a CIO or a technology leader, right? I think of the evolution of technology going back from the 60s, 70s, right? IT was a very niche skill, right? It lived under the CFO for a while. Then CIOs really became in their own, and then CISOs. And now we're seeing a generation of technologists coming out of high school and college, right? People are technically literate,
Yeah.
right? And technology can't just be held yet in the realm of the IT organization, right? We got to figure out how to leverage tools and allow people to leverage yet AI and tools that we don't even know are coming in organizations that are outside of the IT organization in a safe, responsible way. So that democratized, distributed IT model, like how do you work with your peers to bring their education levels up and understand the risk that they're signing the business up by leveraging technology in their organizations is where I'm spending a lot of time and mind share, because there's a lot of technical talent that don't have IT titles, right? And how do we leverage those as a business to really propel our organizations to new heights and new levels, right? In a way that's safe and secure, um, complicated in a lot of ways by AI and the dramatic, rapid change, right? That's going to have, right, for our businesses, right, and you know, humanity as a whole, right? The potentials are great, but it's how do you unlock that human potential of all that technology and all that technology talent that exists outside of the IT organization.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really rich conversation. We covered martial arts, how that integrates with leadership, and how the power of enterprise architecture, and how to make sure it's connected to the business and that relationship, and then back into leadership and team building. It's been really, really great conversation, enlightening conversation. I know there's going to be a lot of value that our listeners have gained from your story and your sharing today. So again, Neil, thank you for joining the show today. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me on. It was a great conversation. I enjoyed it, and hopefully someone gets a little bit of value out of it.
I think there'll be a ton of value for sure. Well, I also want to thank everybody out there for tuning in. Thank you for continuing to be part of this journey with me and us. Your time and attention, again, is everything. If you don't pay any attention to it, this doesn't go anywhere. You're the customer, if you will. If you found today's discussion valuable, please help us by spreading the word, by sharing, letting your colleagues and friends know about the show and know how to find it. And remember, you can catch this in all episodes on YouTube and audio on 15 platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. And the connection to all those platforms are below the podcast today. So until next time, keep leading on purpose and making an impact. Have a great rest of your day. This is David Craig, the Leadership Alchemist, signing off. Thanks again. Have a great day.